Well, welcome to this week's edition of Live Tech Support with Syntax and RME. And also that would include ferrofish, MyMix questions, Apsis questions, any brand that we support here in the Americas. And we're honored to have Jeff Petersen. Hey, Jeff, how's it going?
Going great. How are you doing today, Derek?
Doing great.
Glad to have you back. It was tough last week. I mean, Marie
Oh,
was wonderful, but everybody missed you.
yeah, I'm sure they were really scared. So what's going on in the world of support? Questions, issues, common tales of RME?
Well, every day is something new. That's one of the things I love about my job. I never have the same thing twice. But actually, today I was working on with a ferrofish Pulse 16MX, and I'd like to show you this. So, well, let me show you first of all with my camera. So what I've got here is a Fireface UFX Plus and a Ferrofish Pulse 16MX. The UFX Plus has a MADI port on the back. I've got the Ferrofish connected to it via the MADI optical. And this is kind of a really cool feature. You can actually remote control the Ferrofish unit through MADI. So with that fiber connection, we can go far distances, up to 2,000 meters, which is over a mile between devices. And I can then remote control from my computer using this Ferrofish Pulse, it's called Remote Fish app, and it'll see whatever I have connected to MIDI or MIDI over MADI with the RME unit that is supported MIDI over MADI. So I've got metering here for my input and output channels. I've got info about my clock setup. I can configure what I'm sending to the headphones. So this is pretty slick. I can choose any channels, mono or stereo, of any of my analog, ADAT, MADI, or Dante channels on the device. And I can send that to the headphones, control the level here just by, dragging this around where I want it to go. I can choose clock source. I can even go in and adjust the trim. So let's say, it's a little too hot on those outputs. I can adjust those right here, and that will be affected at the unit, which is connected via MADI and possibly in a totally different room. Got the patch bay here, which is sort of where we set up what channels are going to what. In this case, I've got 16 channels of analog in and out, so I can connect right now. I've got my MADI inputs 1 through 16 patched to my analog outputs 1 through 16. And then I can connect different things to my analog outputs as well, or my analog inputs to ADAT out and MADI out. So I'm duplicating that in this scenario, that the inputs are going to both digital outs. I can save and load my presets, and I can set up this stuff here. So like MIDI routing, well, I'm using MIDI over MADI, so I would need that set up here for this to work. I can control the options on the MADI outputs. Really everything I would want to see. Here's my serial number, my firmware version. So it gives me a really nice overview of what I've got going on with my ferrofish system. If I have multiple units, they'll all show up here. I can have multiple units daisy chained. Pretty slick. And that remote app is a free app for anyone who owns any of the ferrofish Pulse or A32 product.
So basically, they can go to the Ferrofish USA website and download it. It's not run in a web browser like some other
Yeah,
controllers.
right. It's an app for Mac or Windows.
Cool. Why don't you talk a little bit about how the Ferrofish might be used to enhance your RME setup?
Sure. Yeah. So Ferrofish as a company came out of the ashes of an awesome early digital audio company called Creamware. And they were really focused on synthesizer and converting your old analog synths for use in a digital studio. And they came up with a product called the A16 when they were at Creamware. And later on, the same developers opened up shop as Ferrofish. And they've recreated that and kind of built on that legacy of having really good sounding, affordable converters that are really kind of optimized for that kind of user, the guy who has analog hardware that he wants to digitize, whether it's effects units or synthesizers. It's really kind of perfectly suited for that. The price point is great. So like with the Fireface UFX, for instance, that I've got over here, I've got a lot of expansion capability. There's 12 channels built in of analog IOs but the unit supports up to 94 channels total. So in order to take advantage of that huge channel count, I would need to add on some kind of converters. And so with ferrofish, they've got two different products that you can look at. A32 is a 32 channel A to D, D to A with D subs, DB25 connections on the back. And then the Pulse 16 is a 16 channel ADDA with TRS jacks on the back. So it makes things a little easier. The idea here is that a patch bay can work for you to allow you to patch things in or out, but it does sort of slow you down in your creative endeavors. So it's nice to have everything up and running and patched in already, and you just arm the right track and you're ready to go. So you're not interrupting that sort of creative flow to go, now, how did I get from this one to this one? I got to patch this to this, and then dealing with noise and other clicking and things that can come from a patch bay. So, I would definitely recommend anybody who's got RME product with a MADI connection or ADAT connections on it that wants to add some more converter channels to really take a serious look at the ferrofish Pulse 16 or the A32.
Yeah, and I decided to bring up the ferrofish website for people to see. If you go to Ferrofish USA, there's the Pulse 16. This is one of the versions of it. It has the 1/4-inch analog and a lot of the digital inputs and outputs that Jeff just talked about with the Pulse and the A32 is uniquely suited for RME stuff because of the ADAT or the MADI or even the Dante. So if you go here,
they're really good partners. RME and ferrofish work great together. They support the RME MIDI over MADI that I was talking about, and that's how we can do the remote control. And that'll also allow me to plug in MIDI devices to that ferrofish box, in that remote location, whether it's another room in my studio or, another building in the campus, and transmit that MIDI data back to my computer via the MADI connection and record it, record MIDI notes, triggering samplers and things like that on my computer.
And Jeff talked about remote fish. And if you go to the ferrofish site, if you click up on the top left, just above the ferrofish name, downloads, this is where you can download the remote fish. So that's just something to be aware of.
Awesome. We got any comments so far? Guys, please feel free. We are here to help you. So if you are watching and you have any questions about products or just technical stuff in general, or, maybe you want to know how our COVID shots are going, let us know. We're here to help.
Oh, that's funny. So what other questions are you getting these days?
Oh, let me look at my list today. Let's see.
I know there's somebody wanting to know about AVB and Mac. I encourage them to come here and ask their question, but I don't have it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's talk about that a little bit. So AVB is a networking audio system, very similar to Dante in the concept of how it works, but kind of under the hood, it's totally different. So Dante's fantastic, but it's sort of a black box. You have a Dante chip, and that talks to the Dante chip in another box, and the system just kind of arranges itself. Now, with AVB, there's a little more intensive setup involved in planning, because you need to actually make connections between things with another third-party hardware and make sure everything's configured properly. But there's some benefits with AVB, which is that you have sample accurate audio output at every output device. So basically what the idea is the latency in an AVB system is deterministic, which means it's a known thing what the latency is, and everything is going to arrive at the same time. So there are a lot of applications where that's very important. One of those being positional audio, where you're dealing with hundreds of channels, possibly in a speaker array. And for that, AVB is a much, much better solution. So when we start talking about AVB, we're talking about, maybe you're using an Avid live mixing desk that's connecting to a stage box using AVB. So we can tap into that AVB network, capture the channels off of the AVB network, send channels into the AVB network, distribute them to the devices on the network. If you have a Mac, there is a chance that you can get AVB working directly on your network port on your Mac. It's not to say it's bulletproof and rock solid, but it works in general on most current Macs that have a network port. But if that's not going to work, RME has made an interface called DigiFace AVB, and I'm sure we can show that to you if Derek wants to pull that up. But the DigiFace AVB will give you a USB box with an AVB port and word clock IOs. And that connects via USB 3.0 to a Windows PC or a Mac. And it will give you 128 channels of audio in and 128 channels out. And that's going to be going right into your AVB network. So RME is building an ecosystem around AVB in the way that a lot of the other companies have done this with Dante. We see it as sort of a companion to Maddie right now, and maybe eventually becoming the standard in place of Maddie years down the road. But as it stands now, we're trying to kind of keep both going simultaneous. So you can build your system around Maddie now and be ready to flip the switch over into AVB, as your needs change. So really cool system. And, RME always tries to make things as flexible and easy for the end user as possible. So you don't go, oh no, I bought the wrong thing and I can't use this now.
Yeah, I was actually going to pull up some diagrams that you were just kind of
Okay.
talking about. So let me moving around quickly with the mouse here. So here's a setup using AVB, DigiFace AVB on the right, the USB 3 cable represented with the blue line connected to your PC or Mac. And then in this example, we don't need a switch because we're just connecting one AVB device to another. So this is the RME AVB tool, and you can go out with just a straight Cat5 cable into this. And something like this would give you, as Jeff was talking about earlier, 128 channels of audio in both directions. And then you get all the advantages of Total Mix and Total Mix Remote. And then another setup would be like the 12 mic, which is essentially the same thing. And I'm going to address the Maddie in this too, because we can start, if we were to use like a DigiFace Dante, we could go Maddie out of the RME tool, AVB tool, into the Maddie input, and then build on it from there. So here's an example of a 12 mic, and you might be wondering why there's two Maddie connections. Well, you'd want to clock the 12 mic to the clock of the RME. So we want to run Maddie back out. So there's we can clock that so it's stable. And this setup is pretty cool because you'd have 128 channels of AVB over here where I'm pointing with my mouse, and then we can still add Dante devices. So we have those ferrofish connected via Ethernet right to the DigiFace, which is like a switch. And you have quite a setup here.
Wow, that's a hybrid AVB, Maddie, and Dante all in one system.
Exactly.
And that's that kind of flexibility we're talking about. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So imagine this. This is an amazing studio system. You have a 12 mic in your drum room, an AVB interface in your computer, and then we can just take the AVB tool, the small box, and put those in my different recording booths and have everything talking to each other through the network. I can even run a long cable and go down where the acoustics are great in that one hallway or in that bathroom and bring my interface and my mic, and I have my headphone mix. It's super, super flexible. I can see amazing opportunities and flexibility there.
And in this setup, you could open up a web browser on this computer and access these devices. If you ran a USB cable from the back of the 12 mic to your computer, you actually can control these remotely in this particular example. So it's pretty cool stuff. And then Remote Fish could also control the pulses. So yeah, very, very powerful stuff there. And I'm trying to field questions and control this live stream all at the same time. I'm not doing a very good job. I don't see any questions there. I don't have any questions there. I did get a question over email that I was also trying to answer about the drivers. So let me go back and share my screen. So when you go to the RME site, at the very top, there's a downloads link. It goes company downloads forum. If you click downloads, you kind of go through a little small Q&A about what software you want, please choose your product. And this question was about the Digiface AVB. So if you go to the Digiface AVB, then you select an operating system. This person wanted to know about the Mac. Then I have driver and flash update. I'll have Jeff talk about the flash thing in a second. And if you click driver, that's where the drivers are. So you can download everything you need. I think this would also download the controller, the AVB controller.
Yeah, well, you have to also install it. There's a link for that. And then there's now with the last couple of Mac OS versions, they've changed the way that we use our network driver. So there's actually an add-on. If you see that first link there, RME Net IFC. So that is it's sort of like a fake interface, Ethernet interface that you'd install on your Mac, and that tunnels it through the USB into the Digiface AVB or Digiface Dante. And that gets around that Mac restriction of user space. It's a whole complicated technical thing, but basically the idea is you have to install this other app now to give you that bridge into the unit through USB. And then that way we can avoid having to connect a physical network cable from our Mac network port to the Digiface. So regarding the firmware, Derek mentioned that. So a lot of times drivers will be updated pretty regularly, and firmware comes not necessarily every time you get a driver update, but let's say every 3 or 4 driver updates, there may be a companion firmware update to go with that. So basically what that is, you'll download this zip file, unzip it. Inside, you'll have either an executable if you're running on Windows, an exe file, or an app on the Mac. And that is going to reprogram the brain of your interface, whether it's a Fireface or a PCI card or an ADI2 DAC. All of these are built around the same core, which is a FPGA. So the FPGA is your brain, your main guts of the RME unit that does all the audio functions. So it does total mix, it does the steady clock system, it does the USB controller. So these firmware updates are really, really important in the RME world because you are sort of building that bridge between the hardware and the driver on your computer between the driver and the firmware. So it's just something to keep in mind if you are installing a new system or you haven't updated for a while and you're having problems. You go, well, boy, should probably try to update. Make sure you're getting the driver and the firmware update. The great thing with the RME firmware updates is they're very safe. There's a backup BIOS inside of all of our products. So even if something goes horribly wrong, like you lose power in the middle of it, it's not going to brick your device. You will always be able to recover to the backup firmware and then flash update again. So very important to do that. You just basically run the thing. It's going to say you're up to date or you're not. If you're not, you hit update, it programs your unit. And when it finishes, it'll just tell you to power cycle. You'll need to power cycle, like on a Fireface, that's an external device, to just switch it off and on again. If it's an internal card, then I have to power down my PC or Mac and then power it back up after waiting about 10, 15 seconds. The idea being that the new firmware is waiting, and as soon as the unit loses power, then that new firmware becomes active. So that's kind of the little short story of it. But yeah, just be aware that firmware and drivers are both updated very regularly. Drivers more so, but they've been pushing out firmwares pretty recently for a lot of products because there's a lot of times we can actually fix bugs that are on the computer or OS side with our firmware.
That's great. Thank you. Another thing we wanted to kind of mention, because I've had a lot of people ask about the ARC USB. So, I'm going to pull it up just so everybody's looking at it. What this does to an existing RME interface, whether it be a sound card, like an HDSP card, or even a Babyface, but more likely a Fireface or Mattyface product. This is a great little companion product to your interface because it allows you to set up a lot of common functionality that you're going to use in Total Mix. Like, you might have a snapshot of certain settings for when you're recording guitar versus when you're doing something completely different, like mixing down or composing. So you can have different scenes in Total Mix and different layouts in Total Mix and quickly pull them up. And this rotary knob can be assigned to various functions like your headphone volume or I think you can even tie it to a fader group and a gain and a couple other cool little things. So
Yeah.
that's just something to if you don't have an ARC USB, I would definitely consider it. I'm trying to, yeah. So this picture sort of shows you, these are the snapshots in Total Mix, and you can. It's not the only way to use it, but it's just an example. And you can tie those in, and in your Total Mix software, in the menu structure, you can define what these buttons do, which I think is really cool. So definitely check it out and consider it if you don't already have it.
So we got a question on YouTube. How do you turn on and off the Babyface Pro? There's no power switch on it. It's purely bus powered. So if you just want it off, you just unplug the USB either on the Babyface or on your computer. Most computers, new computers now, are keeping the USB ports alive even if the computer's off. I guess that's so you can charge your phone or iPad through the USB. I don't see any other use for it, but because of that your Babyface may end up remaining on even when you shut off your computer. So there's no real good way to turn it off, let's say, in that scenario, other than unplug it. You could theoretically
Unplug the
plug in through
USB
the
cable,
hub.
you mean, right?
Yep, exactly. You can use a hub. I have seen some USB switches that you can buy where you have like a plug into the side of your computer. You can push a button and it turns the USB on and off. That might be a good solution, but basically the idea, it can run all day, no problem. There's no real need to turn off the Babyface.
Yeah, I mean, it can be on for tens of thousands of hours and not have any issue, right?
And if you're not playing it, it's not using a whole lot of power. But yeah. So if you're trying to be green, then just unplug it. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, I'm going there myself. Well, we'll leave it open for another minute or so for if there's any other last minute questions. Otherwise, we'll have to call it a day. The good news is this live stream, like all the other previous ones that we've done, I think we've been doing this. Is this our 5th week?
It's at least 5. Yeah.
4 or 5, is on the Syntax YouTube channel. If you're not already subscribed to the Syntax YouTube channel, we would encourage you to go there. It's just youtube.com/Syntax Syntax Inc.
Yep.
So Syntax Inc. That's SY as in yellow, N as in Nancy, THAX. In fact, should be a logo right on this video, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
So if you subscribe and ring the bell, anytime we do one of these, you'll be notified and you can watch it. And we try to address probably the same 15 questions every week that come up. We try to be different, but it is the common questions that we get. So we want to thank everyone for watching and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.